All right. Happy Friday, everyone. Hopefully, I don't know what time you are, but I guess most of you are here because you are interested in learning about what happened on the bio. Also, a few weeks back, what happened in the ASCO. Today, obviously, it's my great pleasure to have some of the prestigious speakers and also my fellow editors from Asian Biotechs in a bar together, five of us to kind of a recap on Asian Biotechies perspective, what happened at Bio, and particularly what happened and ASCO as well. Again, for those who don't know who we are, let me just give a little bit introduction of BioVerse. And again, Jiamin, if you can see the screen, give me a thumb up. All right, so I guess this is a BioVerse, and this is our 22nd episode. And this episode, five of Asian Biotech is gonna recap ASCO and Bio happened in the past few weeks. Like I said, if you are a first time dive into BioVerse, you may wonder who we are. Let me give a little bit introduction. And BioVerse, our tagline is where science sparks business and medicine. So we start with the science, clinical development, all those CMC, but we always land in business, investment, corporate, and finally we can bring medicines to patients. BioVerse was initially started by InScience We Trust community, which we call ourselves I-Suite community, in case you don't know how to pronounce it. And then later on, we become a three-party partnership, which involve SAPA, which is a Sino-America Pharmaceutical Association, Great Philly chapter, as well as a BioSpark, which luckily is a Boston-based nonprofit. So we actually have a lot of BioSparks member attending the bio, and they are local, so we get a lot of insights as well. With that being said, there's a little bit disclosure. Obviously, we are nonprofit and don't take our opinions from the speakers as your investment suggestion. And this what we say just our personal opinion. Do not necessarily reflect our company's position. With that being cleared, let me just introduce our speakers. Actually, I would like to invite them to introduce themselves. According to the order on the screen, I would like to probably invite Betty, provide a little bit brief introduction of yourself and your company. And Betty, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. It was always a pleasure to join the I-Suite event. And this is Betty. I'm representing Bayer, and I'm part of the BD&L in China. We are part of the global BD&L community for Bayer Group, and we are covering from academic collaboration to the late-stage commercial deals. Thank you, Leo.
Fantastic. And thank you very much, Betty. Welcome to BioVerse. I believe this is your first time. So we like it, and we're going to invite you back. So second one, obviously, is our fellow editor, Angus.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Angus Liu, Deputy Editor with Pharma. I currently lead our publications oncology coverage, mainly focused on in-market products, but also some of the clinical pipelines as well. And I also have a big focus on the life sciences industry in Asia and events that affect the Asian companies. That's it for me.
Fantastic. Angus, we have so much to looking forward from you. You wrote quite a few articles about ASK and some of them about during the bio. So I really want to hear what you have to say. And next, Samuel. Samuel also, actually, I believe it's your first time to be on BioVerse, but we have worked together on other occasions. Please, Samuel, a few words about yourself. Hey, Sam.
First of all, I need to unmute myself.
No worry, you made it.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for Leon's invitation. Yeah, well, I did partner with Leon other events before. So I'm currently Chief Business Officer of Innovent. And Innovent, as you know, is a premier biotech company from China. We launched the 15 medicine over the last 14 years, and now we're looking for global expansion. We have a very rich pipeline. In particular, we feel very proud that we had 8 oral presentation at ASCO 2025. We think that's roughly 2% of all ASCO oral, and including 3 oral presentation on our lead asset, IBI363, which is a PD-1 IL-2 bispecific. And we think that's a global first-in-class and really represent a new direction of immunotherapy, which I have spent the last 3 decades and actually start working on it professionally when the industry still view it as 3 decades of failure. And I look forward to share more insight on the deal making as well as our pipeline in the program.
Fantastic. By the way, your interview with the Bloomberg TV was pretty insightful. Thank you for the shout out for like especially Asian biotech. I believe a lot of people really appreciate your very balanced and optimistic view of what's really going on. And then the last, definitely not the least, my fellow editors and also good friend Jiamin, a few words about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be back. As you know, I'm currently the director in Global Strat Insight team at EMD Serono, the Merck KGGA. As Leon mentioned, I'm also the editor for our iSuite weekly newsletter. So really happy to with so many panelists to discuss the ASCO and Bio. Thanks.
Fantastic. I believe Jiamin, you and I, and also Sam and Betty, we have spoken on quite a few panels during the extended Bio weeks. So I'm really looking forward what do you guys have to share from your interaction from those events. With that being said, let's dive right in. So, let's start, a little bit highlights of ASCO. For me, I feel like that's a while ago, but it turned out just like a few weeks back. With that being said, I'll first pass the baton to Angus. I know you have written a lot of articles during the ASCO, and you picked a few. Probably I'll let you drive from here. Angus, please take it from me.
Thank you, Leon. I'll today mainly focus on 2. There are definitely several interesting data that came out of ASCO, even though overall we think that ASCO was kind of a little bit quiet this year. Despite a case of pre-ASCO news from, there are also things like Zylab's DLL3 data and Innovent. They have that bispecific IL-2 bispecific data, which are kind of interesting as well. But today I'm just going to focus on the ADCs as they continue to move into the first-line setting. I will focus on the 2 in HER2 and Trodelvy, these 2 breast cancer ADCs. We have so far, I think at least 3 vedotin-based ADCs, like Cetrus, Poly-B, and Padcev. These are all 3 vedotin-based ADCs. They have all moved into first-line setting. Now we're seeing more that are potentially going to move into first-line as well. Next slide, please. So the first one is going to be Trodelvy. This is Gilead, the centerpiece of Gilead's Immunomatics acquisition. The data is in first-line triple-negative breast cancer. The clinical trial called ASCENT-04 combines Trodelvy with Keytruda and compared it against chemo. Keytruda, basically, the idea was to use ADC to replace chemo. Here in PD-L1 positive triple-negative cancer, the criteria is CPS of at least 10. The data on the primary endpoint progression-free survival was statistically significant and clinically meaningful. The median PFS, as you can see here, extended by nearly 4 months, and the risk reduction was a 35% reduction in progression or death. And there is also an encouraging early positive trend in overall survival, even though the data were only 26% mature. It showed an 11% risk reduction in death. I would like to highlight here, like there is a very high crossover in the control arm, like 43% of patients crossed over to later receive Trodelvy in the second-line setting, and there were like 81% of this represent, there are some people who haven't gotten to second line who didn't get to second line treatment. So even though the overall number was 43% crossover, it represents 81% of all people who have actually received any second line treatment. So a very high crossover rate, just kind of putting that side by side with that 11% number, risk reduction number. And we saw some PFS benefits shared across multiple subgroups. There's one exception, is patients who have received prior neoadjuvant or adjuvant PD-1 or PD-L1 therapy. There is a hazard ratio of 1.08, but this is a very small group of patients. We'll see how if there will be any FDA reaction around this. But even if this is kind of in the rare kind of in the rare cases where FDA excluded, this is going to be like a relatively small population. And some additional efficacy data: overall survival, overall response rate of 60% versus 53%. And the median duration of response was markedly longer for the Trodelvy-Keytruda combination, 16.5 months, versus a chemo combo arm, which is 9.2 months. And encouragingly, that's kind of also the rationale for using ADCs versus chemo, is tolerability seems to have been improved a little, even though the rate of serious adverse events were kind of higher in the Trodelvy arm. The adverse events that led to discontinuation was notably lower at just 12% for the Trodelvy-Keytruda combination compared with chemo's 31%. So even though there were like higher number of serious adverse events, like fewer people actually discontinued treatment. And KOL feedbacks on this data were very positive. This is an ASCO expert who talked at a press conference, Zhang Meisel from Emory University. She called it potentially practice-changing. And KOL interviewed by Lyric called it like a clear victory of the trial. Next slide, please. But so this is a Kaplan-Meier curves that you could see they're separate, even though the overall survival also shows some positive trend, even though at the tail, both of them, as you expect, there are some, with very few events, there are some instability at the tail, which is understandable. Next slide, please. Despite this like overall very encouraging data, positive feedback, there are a few things that I think is still worth mentioning here. First of all, the control arm in ASCENT-04, this study, the Keytruda chemo combo's median PFS at 77.8 months was notably a little bit shorter than the 9.7 months in KEYNOTE-355, which got Keytruda chemo its FDA approval in first-line TNBC, PD-L1 positive TNBC. So this is a little bit kind of control arm underperforming at least this historical control. But interestingly, the 12-month overall survival data was better than KEYNOTE-355. So even though PFS was a little bit lower, at least overall survival at this point appeared to be better. The control arm appeared to perform better than KEYNOTE-355. Lyric analysts at Lyric, they were like attributing this to like that very high crossover patients, a lot of patients receiving subsequent Trodelvy, kind of pushing up the control arm's overall survival benefits. And another kind of a minor thing is questions on whether FDA will give this full approval at this point or just an accelerated approval. Because with KEYNOTE-355, the FDA initially granted accelerated approval, and because overall survival data were kind of immature, and the FDA at that point didn't give it a full approval. Again, Lyric analysts, they think this is a kind of a low risk, just because you have to appreciate that vast number of crossover and its impact on overall survival data. So probably there's no point like waiting for additional overall survival data given this big crossover, and there's no harm at least at this point. So that we might see a full approval. So Another thing, this is about revenue. I know we talk a lot about data, but this is about revenue. The median Trodelvy treatment duration in first line extended, almost doubled, more than doubled actually, from 8.9 months versus the original ASCENT study in the second line, which was 4.4 months. This could easily be an additional like 1.5 or 2 billion in additional revenue, according to Lyric. Some data points I didn't put in here, but about 50%, I think 50% patients, TNBC, first-line TNBC patients can go on to actually receive second-line treatment. So right now you are doubling the patient pool if you go into the first line. And right now, because this study is in PD-L1 positive study, PD-L1 positive TNBC is about 40% of newly diagnosed patients. So it's roughly the same size of population from ASCENT-04 compared with the second line PD-L1 agnostic TNBC population. So again, Trodelvy has another separate study in PD-L1 negative patients as a single agent, the ASCENT-03 study. That one has also read out and it was positive. We're just waiting to see the exact data. Next one, I think a few points which are kind of interesting is a TROP2 combination that's been playing out. One is AstraZeneca concerning some of the Asian companies here. First one is AstraZeneca and Daiichi Sankyo's Dato-DXd, Dato-DXd. They have a tropion kind of counterpart to ASCENT-04, look very similar to ASCENT-04 study called Tropion Breast 05, which is also in first-line PD-L1 positive TNBC. AstraZeneca has guided to a readout next year. A few push and pulls potentially on this data readout compared with ASCENT-04, how they might play out the eventual data comparison. First of all, this Dato-DXd clinical trial does not allow crossover, which is kind of expected because Dato-DXd was not approved in second-line TNBC. So there's no crossover of Dato-DXd, Dato-DXd here allowed in control arm. But patients were obviously going to choose Trodelvy, the control arm. People in the control arm will obviously choose Trodelvy as their second-line treatment. And because this trial started 15 months, more than a year later than the current ASCENT-04 study, we kind of can expect a wider adoption of Trodelvy in second-line setting. So we'll see how that dynamics plays out in like how many patients get a TROP2 ADC, how many control patients got a TROP2 ADC in the second line, and how that might affect the efficacy readout. And a last thing is the study uses Imfinzi instead of Keytruda as the combination partner with Dato-DXd. So we know like Imfinzi is not exactly Keytruda. So how that might affect the data will also be interesting to see. The other one is obviously Merck and Kelun Biotech's sac-TMT. At ASCO, Kelun presented this China phase 2 OptiTrop Breast 05 study, which tests sac-TMT as a single agent in the PD-L1 agnostic population, but this is a very predominantly majority PD-L1 negative patients. So here they showed a 63% confirmed overall response rate, 71% unconfirmed, and a median PFS of 13.4 months. Yang, if you could go back to, remember those data, Yang, if you could go back to 2 points where the Trodelvy data, another slide. Yeah, you can see kind of compare this to the data to the current Trodelvy data. This looks very favorable, even though this are kind of a little bit different setting. This ASCENT-04 is in PD-L1 positive alone patients, and it's Trodelvy Keytruda combination. Whereas sac-TMT, if we can go back to the sac-TMT, is just in a PD-L1 agnostic population, predominantly PD-L1 negative population. But still, like as a single agent versus Keytruda combination, these looks very favorable. So Kelun currently they have China phase 3 going on in first line PD-L1 negative or some PD-L1 positive patients who have been previously exposed to PD-L1 or PD-1 during early stage treatment. There's no global phase 3 in the first-line TNBC. I don't think they have it yet. So there's no global dynamics going on right now. We'll see what Merck decides on this one. I'm going to speed up a little. Leon, next one on HER2. This is kind of an expected readout, very positive in HER2 in first-line HER2 positive breast cancer. Destiny Breast 09 trial tested in HER2 plus HER2 antibody Perjeta versus the traditional THP regimen. Again, PFS improvement, highly statistically significant, P even lower than 0.0001. And you could see there's a big improvement in median progression-free survival, I think nearly 14 months, and also 44% risk reduction. So it's very impressive PFS result. And overall survival, highly immature, 60% maturity. Again, favorable discovery here, 16% in favor of the HER2 Perjeta combination. Safety was kind of in line, roughly similar between the two arms. Grade 3 treatment emergent adverse events or serious treatment emergent adverse events. Of course, with DXd ADCs, we kind of wanted to look at ILD and pneumonitis, which is obviously higher expectedly higher with HER2, 12% versus just 1%. And the HER2 arm included 2 cases, which is 0.5%, 2 deaths, even though the majority are also grade 1 or 2. But this data, lead author Dr. Serono from Pharma during a press conference, she was just saying that this data, ILD data, were very much in line with doctors' experience. Nothing surprising here, and doctors are very used to managing ILD at this point. And just on the overall sentiment, an ASCO expert, Rebecca Dent from the National Cancer Center of Singapore, she said this could be a new first-line standard treatment option, even though she cautioned that there could be some quality of life impact, and also this is an expensive drug, financial toxicity here. The last point is on there is a third arm HER2 monotherapy data that have not yet reached statistical significance yet at this interim analysis. Next slide, please. This is again, you can see very clear PFS OS benefit at this point, a trend in OS benefit, I should say, at this point. Next slide, please. There are also a few points I would like to highlight with this data. First of all, treatment sequencing. You can see that in HER2's median PFS gradually improved as moving up in the treatment sequence. The data are here. Obviously, with first line is sorry, there's a typo in there. I think it's not 50.7, maybe it's 14.7. But as you get the idea, your patient's median PFS gets longer as you move up the treatment line. And in Daiichi and AstraZeneca were rooting for this, people should use this upfront. But the ASCO discussion, Dr. Claudin Isaacs from Georgetown University argued that it is unclear whether HER2 should be best in first line. One data point that could help us guide doctors on that decision is PFS2, which is how you perform after progression on second line follow-on therapy. Here, the data showing HER2 arm had a 40% lower risk on PFS2, but there were only 10% control arm patients who got HER2 in the second line. So this is you cannot tell if HER2 in the second line is really doing anything here with this low percentage of patients. And we might know more later because there aren't many patients, overall number of patients who got second line treatment at this point. So this is, and on to Dr. Isaacs, this is not a done deal yet on whether HER2 should be used in first line. Another more important question, which Daiichi thank you during my interview with them, with their global oncology head, Ken Keller, he also acknowledged this, is like the treatment duration question. The Destiny-Breast09 study currently gives Enhertu until progression. But there's recent phase 3 trial called Patina. It found that in HER2-positive breast cancer that are also HR-positive, there's a benefit of adding CDK4/6 inhibitor to standard first-line maintenance therapy. So there is we're thinking of, and also Dr. Isaacs, she pointed out that in another early stage Destiny-Breast07 study, which is also in the first-line setting, Enhertu and Perjeta achieved most of its responses very rapidly within the 12 months. So doctors may be tempted to experiment, like let's just use Enhertu and Perjeta during induction, get that response fast, and then discontinue Enhertu and try experimenting around that patina-based kind of a regimen without Enhertu during the maintenance phase. This is very important because HR-positive cases make up about 2/3 of all HER2-positive cases. So we'll just have to see whether doctor will discontinue Enhertu after achieving that initial response and switch to a kind of no Enhertu maintenance therapy. A few other points, like ADCs keep moving earlier into the treatment sequence. There's a neoadjuvant trial, Destiny-Breast11. AstraZeneca and Jiamin has top-lined this positive on PCR, I think. And there's another adjuvant trial, Destiny-Breast05, expected in the second half of 2025. And I just wanted to tag along here some of the post-Enhertu market discussion. As you move into the first line, this post-Enhertu market is just growing bigger and bigger. So Jazz is saying they are kind of the first here. They have a HER2 bispecific called zanidatamab. It has already moved into phase 3 in the post-Enhertu setting. And Pfizer RemeGen, they have this HER2 ADC as well. And Pfizer Oncology's early development head, Dr. Megan O'Meara, she told me that it's an important question that they're looking at really closely right now. And I think Daiichi might also have an interest in this. During my discussion with them, they were saying that they were exploring additional toxin beyond DXd, which may help them get some of the post-Enhertu market. That's it for me. Thank you, Leo.
Actually, quick comments for your last bullet points. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Alpha Map Oncology also have their biparatopic HER2 ADC in kind of a similar setting in phase 3. I think they may have some data coming out. Is what I heard when I was chatting. Yeah, China only data in this case. It's going to be very interesting, like you pointed out, right? I mean, that's where Roche made so much revenue from this setting, right? Because the patient on the drug for such a long time. As you show here, I mean, the PFS, median PFS is like multiple years, right? Anyway, thank you so much, Angus. Let's just move on to some others. That's definitely a headline grabbing abstract. As you can see, ADC is really taking the center stage. Feels like a mini version of PD-1, right? A couple of years ago, especially your first one you highlighted, was actually is ADC plus PD-1. Anyway, let's get into this. That's like a natural transition to this kind of a, probably the hottest topic in the oncology space, PD-1 or PD-L1 VEGF bispecific. There's actually quite two major deals before and during ASCO, so we can touch base on that a little bit, and also the Claudin 18.2 ADC deal. So I will just get started. I mean, honestly, the data I'm not super familiar. It's probably Angus, you can comment. So what happened, just as a reminder for everyone who is listening right now, it's really before ASCO, Pfizer obviously did this deal with 3S Bio from China. That was a phase 3 ready assay. Just want to remind people, right after Pfizer announced the deal, that assay started phase 3 in China, I believe. So very meaningful upfront payment and the biobox total together is more than 6 billion. People were a little bit shocked by the numbers, and before people recover, then there's another one, which is the one on the right, where BioTech originally got this asset from China Biotech, and then they just did this really massive deal with BMS, which include like a 1.5 billion upfront and a 2 billion non-contingent payment in the period of 2 years, and almost $8 billion biobucks, and that only 50% of rights. So the first one already pretty huge. The second one even bigger. I mean I only know the number as a deal maker, but the nuances behind it. I would invite Angus probably if you want to take a first try, and whoever from the panel willing to share some insights, please feel free. So I'll probably start with you, Angus. What do you think?
I simply think like this reflects these two companies' appetite for M&As, and just how desperate, probably not desperate, but how eager they are to snatch up new oncology assets. And as Pfizer CEO commented, like they have a very high bar after Seagen, after they spent so much money on one company. They have a very high bar of what oncology assets they have. So this is one of the new assets that they have. And let me remind everybody, Pfizer just have a new oncology R&D head from Novartis, Jeff Legos. He just joined. So we'll see how they plan to build on this deal and into other some of their ADC combinations. And Bristol Myers, we could see that the LAG-3, they discontinued TIGIT, and their LAG-3 is kind of like still in a lot of question where it can go. So this getting this deal is definitely something that they are very aggressively. I think someone from BMS at Bio, I wasn't there, but I saw this post about how they're saying the BMS BD thing is kind of at an all-time high right now, like looking for some of the new assets. And they recently have two big deals, two drugs from their two big deals, Cobenfy and Camzyos. They both have like a phase 3 failure recently. So this kind of, you could expect this opening up to potentially new BD deals. So I think this is kind of their reactions to their need to pursue new business development. Welcome.
Any comments from others? Any comment from others?
I can add on to, I think Angus made a perfect point that they are eager to, and I just make comments from strategic need perspective, right? So Pfizer has with the Seagen acquisition, has a very broad antibody drug conjugate portfolio. So from them perspective, have IO as a backbone to combine with that antibody drug conjugate portfolio is quite critical. And BMS, obviously, I worked at the BMS from 2010 on nivolumab to 2013, and I was involved in initial nivolumab business case, going through governance review, and also initial development and registration strategy. So, BMS had some setbacks before, and nivolumab was a leader, and then they lost to Merck. So they are motivated, right, to win in the next next phase. So I think that probably partially reflect in this. I mean, one big question I have is why didn't they outbid Pfizer in the 3S Bio, and instead they paid much higher valuation just 2 weeks later. So that's I think an interesting question, perhaps for people to digest. I certainly don't have a clear answer on it.
Yeah, I think adding on top of that from Sam's comments, yes, I think Pfizer is very interesting in combining with their ADC from Seagen's with all these new bispecifics. I remember they had actually a deal with Summit with their Akesos bispecifics. I think they asked for collaboration with the potential combo with all these ADCs, but seems like they probably find that it's probably worth it to spend some money to get something by their own 100%, so they can really play around with multiple strategies in this case.
Yeah, probably. Go ahead, Betty, please.
Yeah, from my perspective, I see quite a positive turnaround, particularly with the Pfizer 3S Bio deal. because remember, multiple years ago, actually, there's a lot of doubt or skepticism over the data generated only from China, right? So I think back to Jiamin's question, why don't you buy Summit asset? You go for the 3S Bio. I think one of the key differences, I guess 3S Bio already in the phase 3 with quite a number of patient data generated. So at least from my personal perspective, that's a really positive sign that people see the value of the clinical data generated from China as as a reliable source for the deal making as well, right? So that's some takeaway I'm having. But again, maybe back to Angus' point, multinational companies are facing patent cliff, and we do want to get the best asset. But regarding to different transaction strategy or deal appetite, every company has different approach. And for Bayer, we are more like our marker-driven oncology play rather than IO checkpoint. So that's why we are still watch the trend. And the lucky thing is it's never, going to be too late for any good asset. So that's also my takeaway.
I totally agree. I think this, let's go back to the science a little bit. Angus, the first presentation for Angus already showed that the field really believe in, PD-1 plus chemo story, or PD-1 plus ADC, aka precision chemo, right? Chemo monotherapy. So that's already show, kind of pretty much authority validated, right, for multiple indications. So I think what the people look at here, if you read the press release from Pfizer, Merck, and BMS all say the same thing. The PD-1 VEGF bispecific going to be the backbone, and they're going to pair this with ADC. So kind of this kind of how to say, low risk upgrade, but you have a high chance you're going to have a improvement of your clinical benefits. I guess that's probably why Big Pharma pile on this idea. And another thing, actually, during my conversation, just a random conversation with the Western company, especially pharma, profitable pharma, large and small, realize, actually this is a game only allow big pharma to play. If you look at upfront payment, all those costs that they're gonna budget for their future clinical development. For small or like a boutique pharma, with the probably revenue less than 1 billion per year, that's gonna be hard. I think that's just my personal view. So if I say I'm anything wrong, please correct me.
Yeah, adding on to Leah, your point, right? BioNTech is not a small biotech, right?
Right.
It has a pretty strong financial resources, but they still feel they need to partner with a much bigger player. That's
Right. So this is really for big company, big play, tens of billions of development budget. With that being said, actually, the next abstract is a good transition to add on the point Betty just said. So Jiamin probably can take on this one. This is also like an early stage asset, the Astela one.
Yeah, I think we probably also see, from Japan farmers' interest in China biotech's assets. Recently, Astellas acquired CLD, Claudin 18.2 ADC from Eventpoint Bio, which is a China biotech, I think, in Suzhou. This is a logic move for Astellas, given there has the first Claudin 18.2 target therapy, which is an antibody approved in 2023, which is targeted for first-line gastric cancer. For that asset as an antibody, they reach around ORR 30 to 40% in the first-line gastric cancer. However, there is a catch. They require over 75% of Claudin 18.2 expression in the immunochemistry staining. So that does limit significantly the eligible population. Now, to thinking about the next move and also keep the dominance of their Claudin 18.2 business in the gastric cancer, I think they're looking for next generation assets, and definitely they're looking forward to see ADC, a very natural modality, after the antibody. What they find is, I think there are actually several Claudin 18.2. As we know, it's very crowded in ADC space, its target. Even for just looking at topo 1 payload, Claudin 18.2 ADC, there are probably 6 to 7 already in the clinical stage. Lots of assets. But for Astellas, they definitely want to looking assets with reliable or at least early clinical signal, right? To make sure they have a de-risk all these assets. Among them, I think even Point has already reported from this ASCO, actually 2025, the latest data, they have reported around 60% of the ORR as a monotherapy in second-line gastric cancer. And more, appealing to Astellas is they only require a biomarker threshold around 5% of these, immunochemistry staining. So if that can be replicated in the final phase 3, that means the eligibility of patients will significantly increase and have a potential, much better efficacy. So that is definitely, attractive to Astellas. Of course, even Point's ADC is not the only one on the market. There are still other things from China Biotech. But that said, some of them may be already partnered. Some of them, like Currents, was just returned from the Merck. So which is maybe not most easy one to argue with the board, right? So that comes down to a few, choice, and then Astellas probably contact multiple of them and make the final choice. So anyway, I would say this is reflecting, not only European, US, but also Japan Pharma is really looking forward to all these novel assets, especially ADC from China. Clinical data is the key if we want to sell anything for a big bucks. And at the same time, I think inevitably you have to compete with other player in the same space, and hopefully your clinical data can stand out, have the chance to discuss with all these major players and to get a good deal.
Yeah, probably a quick comment. So Jiamin, I know you know their CBO. I actually happen to know their CEO and I met with him. I exchanged a few words and ASCO. I mean, I can tell you the poster was so popular. Obviously, everyone saw the deal and went to check out his poster and so proud. And both like the R&D people from Astellas and Everpoint were there. So I mean, a little bit background about this company. Actually, the management team is quite young. That's actually reflect the new generation of China biotech executives. They largely spend their career in China. You may argue they are like kind of domestically grown biotech executives, and so it's very interesting. I think people should keep your eyes open for this younger and newer generation of executives, right? So we knew China biotech was initially kind of started by, we call them sea turtle, the returnee who have spent many years overseas. But I see this like a new generation of younger biotech. Oftentimes there's CEO or like president are kind of relatively young and spend most of their time in industry in China. So that's just like a quick observation. Use this one as a case study. Back to you, Jiamin. I know you have two more.
Yeah, I think also echoing Liang, yeah, Even Point, I think they built their own proprietary ADC platform and linker technology. Yeah, as you just highlight, those are probably China-born technology and talents. They are really getting the notice from the global stage. Yeah, we are really looking forward, hopefully, more innovation coming from China. So other things I think really worth to talking about, first of all, is Merck's HER3 ADC failure. It failed in the EGFR mutant non-small cell lung cancer in second line. There is some story behind it. This is a molecule was passed by AstraZeneca when, first of all, Daiichi is trying to looking forward for this a big packaging deal. But more interesting for this thing is Merck has used this HER3 ADC in third line EGFR mutant non-small cell lung cancer with a single arm trial and asked for accelerated approval. It get the CRL back, but it's not because the efficacy problem, but mainly because the manufacturing inspection issues. And that time, I think last year, I think the second half of the last year, they announced the HER3 ADC actually succeed to meet the primary endpoint of PFS in the second line EGFR mutant non-small cell lung cancer. So at the time, we all think, this is another win for Daiichi's ADC platform. Another molecule could play an important role in non-small cell lung cancer. However, when we review the ASCO data, first of all, we realized the PFS, even though it reached statistical significance, but it's only around 0.5 months difference. So it's hardly a clinical meaningful data. More than that, just a couple of days later, after they released the ASCO abstract, Merck announced that they withdraw voluntarily from this BLA because the overall survival did not meet statistical significance, even though the overall survival is not the primary endpoint, only the PFS is. But we probably guess they definitely has discussed with the regulatory and probably get some comments on, if you don't have a very good PFS clinical meaningful difference, and also you failed in your overall survival, it's not likely look very favorable in the face of all these regulatory, and also eventually all the physicians are unlikely to take that one. So I think for this case, there are still lots of unknowns in the ADC. HER3 is a very interesting target, but seems like this one is not a good win in non-small cell lung cancer. Merck's still testing the HER3 ADC in other indications, including breast cancers, but let's wait and see what will happen. And there is probably increasing more relevant question is the validation of these HER3 targets, because we know, for example, Bristol Myers and Jiamin has the Izabrine, which is a HER3 EGFR bispecific ADC. Now, how valid the HER3 target could be, and how do you evaluate a bispecific ADC? Which target would be more important, or do they really matters, both of them, or maybe one of them is the key to show the efficacy? So there's a lot of questions coming from this news, but it will be interesting to see the follow-up data and to understand more regarding in this ADC space. So move on quickly into the cell therapy, which I have a special passion given my previous life as working in that space. So we do see some encouraging data from glioblastoma in this ASCO. As we all know, glioblastoma, the GBM, is the most common brain cancer. It's very tough to treat. For a new GBM patients, the survival is only around a year. If you have for relapsed the patients, they probably only get 6 months. So this time from UPenn, they have a dual target CAR T, is both targeting EGFR and IL-13A2, and they have reported some encouraging results, around 60% of ORR in very small number, 18 patients, but they do see at least 2 patients survive very long, and even 1 patient have a PFS over more than 16 months, which is very encouraging. But as you know, for this kind of early phase for CAR T, there are many questions. They do have early encouraging sign, because for 1 patient from the spinal fluid, they can still detect CAR T cells after 1 year of injection. So that's suggesting, all these CAR Ts may have a long-term role in secure all these PFS. Now, I think the UPenn is really looking into a next trial, probably a phase 2 trial in never treated new GBM patient. The data they report at ASCO is from relapsed GBM patients. So likely they hope to see a better efficacy response when those patients is naive to any treatment. Most importantly, I think this patent has already been acquired, I think, by Gilead. Gilead is really looking forward to, first of all, technology transfer to get academic setting into the industry setting, and they are looking forward to test this one in those tough solid tumor, especially in brain cancer. There are also other, I think, cell therapy news, good news in GBM as well. I think this is the Iron 8 Bio, which study testing novel gamma delta T cells. And they also report there's one case, a patient has successfully across 4 years of PFS in the GBM treated by their gamma delta T cell, which is encouraging, but at the same time, the company has to pause the trial because of the lack of funding. So as we know, there are promising signal from all these cell therapy for this tough sort of tumor, but at the same time, these are still rare tumor, and it's very tough to treat, and there's going to be a very long way to fully materialize all these early signal make into a real affordable commercial product, which cause still investment in the cell therapy will still be a very important barrier at the current environment. Back to you, Leon.
Fantastic. I guess I'm gonna invite Sam to share some of the updates from you. He already mentioned they got a 3 oral presentation about this molecule. So Sam, please.
Yeah, so we're very excited about this novel approach, and we think that represent the real advance in immunotherapy. And of course, it's great to see a lot of deal activity in IO, PD-1 VEGF specifically, and it's great to see actually all 3 deals involving Chinese biotech, right? Basically, the asset originated from Chinese biotech, and there's an obvious reason, right? Those are the 2 proving mechanism actions, and on the other hand, the VEGF is anti-angiogenesis mechanism action. So that's where you see the overall survival improvement. Hazard ratio is only 0.8 versus PFS is like 50% improvement, but overall survival is only 20%, and it remains to be seen whether the statistical significance can be reached, right, in the final analysis. What we felt very excited about our molecule is that it represent a real immuno-oncology advance, right? So IL-2 is as authentic IO mechanism action as any, right? It's probably one of the early ones. The only problem is that it has a lot of toxicity when you give it systematically. So, and people trying to address that for the last decade and maybe 2 decades, and without any success. And I have to give credit to our scientists, really went against the prevailing industry trend in IL-2, not going into the details, and they rely on the data generated in their own lab, and which is indicate a different direction from the entire industry. So they have to go back and say, hey, is our data wrong or something going on that the industry is heading to the wrong direction? Obviously, you don't want to assume the entire industry is heading to the wrong direction. So you examine your own laboratory data. And after several repeats, I mean, it's coming out the same kind of result. So they just, being a true scientist, I think I want to give credit to our scientists and go back to what Leon said about our people, right? From scientific field, from clinical development, from business field, are really growing up, and they follow this science, and they design this PD-1 IL-2, specifically alpha bias IL-2. And I think the ASCO 2025, if you call the come out party, that it's clinical validated this approach, and we are a very well differentiated assets. And the early clinical development, so there are 3 oral abstracts in phase 1, and of course in oncology you actually have a pretty good efficacy data already. These are the in non-small cell lung cancer and melanoma. These are the PD-1 treated, right? So non-small cell lung cancer, it's a basically PD-1 plus chemo treated. And then you receive PD-1 IL-2 bispecific. And the kind of response, I mentioned earlier, I work at nivolumab, before it was called nivolumab. And I started by in the scientific concept immunotherapy 3 decades ago when I was at Kyoto University. working on transgenic animal. And what's amazing is that in second line non-small cell lung cancer, patients who have progressed on PD-1 plus chemo, the kind of response rate, we get up to 37%. And what got people excited about nivolumab and anti-PD-1 was that in second-line non-small cell lung cancer, it has a 20% response rate. And those are IO-naive patients. And here we're talking about IO-resistant patients. We got 37% response rate. I think if you look into the details, it's very, very compelling data. I have to say this is the reason why I joined Innovent. When I see the data, I was just saying, wow, this is just blowing me off, right? And in addition, we have in the basic microsatellite stable CRC, and this is a bona fide immune cold tumor for pembro or for nivo, 0% response rate, 0 response at all. And here for monotherapy, we have double-digit response rate as monotherapy. And we can combine with bevacizumab to further increase the efficacy. I mean, that alone is a significant advance. And this is for the first time a monotherapy IO actually have significant activity in immune cold CRC. Not only that, we also have in the immune cold melanoma. People often think melanoma are hot tumor, but actually there are subsets of immune cold tumor are a subset of melanoma are actually immune cold tumor, the so-called mucosal melanoma. First line pembro only have about 13 to 15% response rate, and our data show that even after you progressed on pembro or other PD-1, we still get 23% response rate in those patients. And think about the first line, how high a response it could be. So we think this is a clear clinical validation of our approach, and it represents a new direction of the PD-1 bispecific and potentially be a real alternative of PD-1 VEGF, perhaps even more attractive alternative to PD-1 VEGF, because the ultimate goal of immunotherapy is to increase long-term survival. So you would want to see the overall survival improvement is better than PFS improvement. We certainly did not see that in PD-1 VEGF. And the early clinic data show that in IBI363, the PD-1 IL-2 bispecific, the early data shows overall survival is equally as good as PFS and perhaps even better. But obviously, we need to wait until later confirmative trial. But we're very happy to see the early sign, very, very promising.
Fantastic. Congratulations. I mean, that sounds quite amazing. It's looking forward to more data, more mature data. All right, I guess we're going to wrap up on ASCO. It's a little bit longer than we thought, but that's great because, obviously there's a lot of more material. Let's dive into a bio. I will probably set the stage a little bit. This is actually came from right after ASCO. Actually, a lot of people talk about this, so I want to use this as a reference. This has really got a lot of attention. If you go to Twitter, Twitter, a lot of people circulate this graph, which pretty much show that China Biotech Biopharma received almost like a half of upfront payment from the BD deals with the big pharma in oncology space. Want to emphasize, first of all, that's only BD deal. That's only in oncology, right? It does not, apply to other disease area. And also the chart on the far right was annualized. It's not like the real number, right? They're based on the first, I believe, 5-month BD transaction in oncology, and they assume this trend to continue. That's what they're going to be. So anyway, that's quite impressive. I think that's generate a lot of kind of a discussion and thinking when people look at the chart. And also, this is actually a good data point to reflect another trend, which is well-known among the China Biotech Biopharma community, but not so much to the global community. That would be the next chart. This is pretty fresh. I think this is really the market closed in Hong Kong already in Friday. So as you can see, there's a Hong Kong equivalent to XBI to the US biotech, which is based on the biotech companies on Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And if you look at that, even there's some dip, but still as of today, year to date in 2025, Hong Kong's version of XBI has gone up almost 50%. And some point was, I believe, 65, 67%. I mean, as you can see, there's strong correlation between the XBI and the Hong Kong equivalent XBI, but XBI is still trending downwards generally, but the Hong Kong biotech index trending upward. Just a point of view, like a recent IPO, as you may recall, there's a ADC specialist biotech Duality. I believe their stock price double on the IPO day, and there's also the largest by fundraising IPO in 5 years from China, which is Henry's dual listing on Hong Kong Stock Exchange that raised 1.3 billion, about 1.3 billion US dollars. And I also believe Henry right now, likely, I think it's the largest innovative big pharma out of Asia. I think as of today, probably the market cap slightly bigger than Takeda. That's what I remember. And also, there's quite a few China biotech Q4 IPO. I just lead a few names that they made a public announcement. I'll stop right there. This really just as kind of setting the stage, in case our audience don't know what's really going on. First of all, the oncology BD licensing in China is taking significant share, and because of that, plus other disease areas licensing, the public capital market in Hong Kong at least is pretty active compared to the biotech stock public capital market to the US. With that being said, I can open the floor now. Let's just do some discussion. There's no more data, no more chart. I can stop sharing, and I will probably start with asking. I was asking Sam and Betty and also Jiamin, whoever wants to start first. I know you guys have spoken in quite a few panels. As long as it's a public information, feel free to share. Probably I can cue Betty first. Well, what's the sentiment you have seen, and what's the kind of top chatters you have heard?
Yeah, I think it's exciting bio this year, right? There are so many, positive news coming from ASCO and AACR recently from the Chinese biotech companies. And honestly speaking, during this bio, I also, because I was in discussion with my global colleagues as well, right? They were so significantly surprised by the different speed as well as the quality that our Chinese companies are bringing to the international stage, right? So I think obviously, in the past, people are always talking about speed, but this year, I heard so many comments over the quality, over their innovation level, and so on and so forth. I want to echo what Leon was just mentioning. I think the key observation from my side are some 3 key words for this year. So the young talents from China, I saw many young executives very passionate about science. They are back to China, or they made, I think most of them are back to China in early years, and they are very much devoted to the innovation and pharmaceutical industry in China. And secondly, the novel technology platform or novel assets, Chinese companies dare to explore these days. I think they have confidence and courage to explore more advanced science. And they're aware that purely kind of repeating the me better or me too kind of play is not enough, right? So I think that's something I also observed. Third one is also I hear some concerns about policy. I think it's more about the policy from US rather than the policy from China these days. And people are actually having quite positive comments on their new FDA authority. I think he made some speech in the bio, and that actually brought a lot of confidence to the audience as well about to simplify the process, optimize the working flow, and so on and so forth. So I think these are 3 observations I had during the bio. Leo, back to you.
Yeah, please continue. I know Sam, Jiamin, Angus, feel free. Just a kind of opening remark. What's your overall feeling about bio?
Well, one of the biggest thing I liked about this bio is there is like 10 days in between ASCO and the bio, so allow us to not to rush out of ASCO and rush into bio. And but I understand our international colleagues does not exactly like that, because then they have to make 2 trips instead of 1 trip. I think this year's bio is just like every other year. It's very vibrant, and I noticed there are 20,000 attendees, almost matching. I mean, not quite there yet as ASCO, but a lot, right? That means there's 1,000 companies are coming here, and I do hear comments about there's more and more Chinese biotech representative in there, and I think that's echoing Leon what you showed earlier, right? So this is a great value, and it's great to see increased presence and increased deal making from Chinese biotech.
Probably I can follow question, not specific to any panelists. Do you say the kind of how's it, booming capital market or recovering? I wouldn't say booming, so recovering still much lower than the peak, right, in Hong Kong Stock Exchange, biotech, but they are definitely recovering faster than the US biotech. How does that influence the mentality of China biotech or biopharma when they do deal making? Anyone want to comment?
Maybe if no one, I would. That's an interesting topic, Leon. Because I talk with some of the companies. Actually, they are based in US, right? Regardless whether the founder is a foreigner or he's a Chinese, but they told me that the funding in US is so difficult these days, and they're looking back to China to seek for funding or go for the IPO market. So I think it's definitely changing compared with half a year ago or 1 year ago. I think this is quite impressive. Thanks for reminding me that, Leo.
Yeah, I want to add on to Betty's. I don't. I think maybe the recovery is very fast. But I think the U.S. market, public market that we're talking about, recovered much earlier, right? It may be a little bit more, so the direction of change is not as fast as in Hong Kong Stock Exchange, but it may be, I don't know. In my mind, it's actually healthier and it's actually more sustained, right? So I do think that the China biotech deal making is driving a lot of interest and feeding to this investment, and does help a lot of companies to really get funding, and including the successful IPO, which is a great thing. But I also think that investment has to be methodical, right? And be taking the right approach, etc., to make sure that it's a sustained approach.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I just want to get what I heard from the BioVerse meeting, because I'm located in Boston, so get the chance to host some dinner events, with old friends. One thing is, given that we are talking about Asian biotech, beyond China alone, I heard there are many Korean biotech coming to the bio, and they are having more and more presence in those stage, and some of them also show pretty solid data, potentially become a source of innovation later, or some of them maybe already. And also I heard that they have a special government funding to support all these Korean biotech to get first in human clinical trial. I never know that, but it's very interesting to see that this is Asian country. There is, I know, like Singapore, Korea, there is some government policy support to encourage biotech development, as they all see this is the future of this whole industry, and for the benefit of all their citizenship as well. So that's one extra thing we heard, regarding the overall Asian biotech in the bio. It's not only China, but also other space is also catching up and play more and more important role in the global biopharma ecosystem. To catch on Samuel's comments, I also heard, someone has some concern. There are definitely good things, for the China biotech, with all these good deals, big upfront, and also large total size. But at the same time, so I heard some concern, China biotech nowadays, feel encouraged by all these big deals and also encouraged by, Hong Kong IPO chance. There are investor or board, seeking more higher price expectation, from all these deals. They now see, benchmark themselves towards, the big deal they heard. Some, not because not everyone really understand lots of nuance details, which assets is really pivotal for some big pharma, or they are competing, or sometimes, which assets, their data really matters that much. So there are some concerns regarding a more realistic expectation, maybe more healthy. I guess, Sam, maybe that's some part of your talking about, in the US, more healthy investment attitude. Maybe part of them is because, you need to really be fully understand the situation, understand the choice from big pharma side, and understand the science and also the real commercial opportunity for your assets. And then you maybe set a more appropriate expectation to really help your company to get the investment, get the cash flow you expect. But, love to get panelists like Betty, Sam's comments on that part.
Yeah, maybe I should say, first the rebound is probably overdue, right? Because it maybe went down too extreme. And I think that's one thing that you don't want the volatility, right, to be. So it is perhaps overdue. It's a recognition, but on the other hand, as Jiamin said, I mean, that's certainly not, that's certainly raised concern. Right?
Yeah, probably. Oh, go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, I just want to thank Jiamin for mentioning that the first point about innovation arising from Asia in general, right? I think the other point I noticed is, for instance, this year there is this academic collaboration or partnering dedicated rooms for academics, and also a Kyoto University who is in very good collaboration with Bio. We even had a dedicated session to host Kyoto University to have some pitch event in Boston, right? They are also coming, and I think that's in general, a good sign of innovation should come from anywhere across the world. And the second one about back to this question about the valuation side, I'm extremely happy that Jiamin mentioned that, right? I think yes, some of the transactions was done even because multinational companies are eager to do deals, because it's strategic core. They cannot wait until the train is off the station, right? But nevertheless, I think one of the potential improvement area for the ecosystem in China is we are really lacking as mature and as professional as in US market, the investors and the investment mindset and the proper valuation. It's not benchmark. We should not always use the benchmark, but we really should sit down and look into the computation landscape, what's the value this asset can bring to the patients, to the society, and what exactly, the society can shape the policy making environment, right, to create base value out of an innovative asset. I think that's still missing in China or in the overall, Hong Kong capital market. So that's why we see the volatility all the time, right? But again, I hope that we'll in the future we will not bet on luck, but bet on a real logical and rational based valuation methodology approach. Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, Jiamin.
Yeah, totally agree. I understand. Of course, it is a demand and supply. Sometimes, you have to look in the benchmark, for example, probably in the PD-L1 VEGF bispecific race, they tend towards more about the supply and demand curve. However, I think we need to be aware there is a survival effect here. You only hear the success story, right? You only hear the big news, the big success, but you forget that behind that there may be a much larger is failure, unsuccessful negotiation, maybe partially, as Betty mentioned, if you don't fully aware your value, your assets value based on more fundamentals, the commercial calculation, the competition, the overall market size, patient eligible population. So those kind of things maybe will get you anchored in a wrong benchmark, which could be backfire or counterproductive when you really start talking to big farmers or potential partner, because you may set up the first anchor position in probably a not very realistic place, maybe slow down or get backfire for your progress. Yeah, I think Betty, you have a very good point.
So probably I can share some like a de-identified, general observation, because my small consulting firm represent both buyer and seller, right? So actually we have a US biotech company sourcing innovation from Asia. We also represent a few China-based biotech from a Western partner. So, based on my small sample, just over 30 millions with the, partner, either big pharma, fund. My observation, first off, from the US biotech side, they fully recognize the value of the Asian innovation, not just China. I want to emphasize, actually, we're talking not just like a China-based company, but also from Singapore, South Korea. Very good. You have to give those government a little bit credits. Their industry policy really have helped their companies. Right, they're actively involved in helping their companies. So that's one. Second, right now, especially for some like a new startup company, even they have a really good investor. Keep in mind, the investor in the US, they have a opportunity to invest in any company anywhere in China, in the world, not just in the US, but also in Europe and China. So I remember in ASCO, I learned this one thing. I could be wrong. So Sam, probably the best. Please correct me. Someone told me quite a few. China oncology biotech company told me, give them $30 million, give them 3 years, give them establish a target with a very little biological risk. They can get that asset from nothing to a pivotal trial with $30 million in 3 years. If that's true, first of all, I just heard from a few CEOs. If that's true, that's going to be a high bar for a lot of US biotech to kind of argue against their investors' suggestion for them to go China or go Asia, fund some early stage, even early clinical stage asset to have a jump start. To be fair, there's a lot of very successful US biotech, take a recent example, such as Intracellular, such as kind of a Corona, Cerevel. That's how they started, right? They did not develop the molecule from very beginning. Also, like a Shinuk, right? That very successful one. They all start like that. So that's a huge portion of Western biotech, especially in the US. That's their business model, right? Start with a pipeline they licensed from big pharma. So I think that business model right now probably become more compelling. Since they have a broader choice of innovation, not just from big pharma discontinued program, but also from Asia. That's my observation. So I think that's one. And from the China side, I think the Asian side in general, but I only speak for China about because I only have a China about clients here. They do have a little bit leverage now because before when the capital market is so bad, there's no private investor interest. They have to sell their best asset. Now they have access to probably get a little bit of help both from the public market and also private market. They prefer to carry their asset a little bit down the road. They say if before they don't have a money to bring to phase 1, now they will bring them to phase 1. Then they want to kind of find a partner. But again, still vast majority, almost all of them except for a few, China-based biotech or biopharma could not do global clinical development. That's probably the reason why biotech create a lot of value. People think, the original China biotech had a rough deal. I don't think so, to be honest, because biotech brought in this tremendous capability of clinical development. on the global stage to this asset. Otherwise, the asset would not have a sold to or like partner with a BMS in such a high value. So that's what I observe. From a really small sample representing either the buy side or sell side. I'll stop right here. And actually, I would like to Angus comment a little bit. I know you are in the swamp. You probably have seen a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think starting from a U.S. perspective, I think a lot of the slow recovery is kind of self-inflicted in the U.S. given a lot of the uncertainties going on here with the FDA, which the HHS and the regulation with the regulators. This is very volatile things, and adding on to that is like a lot of these cheaper or faster Chinese assets coming in, like impacting when you like big pharma only have so much money. Like if you're spending 50% on Chinese companies, it means the US companies have 50% less. So this is adding on to all this uncertainties, you're under pressure from additional competition. So this is, like I said, a large part of it is still self-inflicted, and another part is obviously additional competition from China. But regarding Chinese collaborations, I'm not very familiar with biotech valuations, but I still think that we're kind of treading, we see a little bit of readjustment on stock prices in the past 2 to 3 days after that big surge. I think that's a good thing before we enter another bubble and people get overly optimistic, because the uncertainties affecting the US is also affecting Chinese companies as well. Like you're basically still selling these products to the biggest market is still currently in the US, and with pricing and everything, everything will kind of backfire or affect Chinese companies with your products as well. Another thing is remains, I would like to remind that despite all the positive signals, how the positive feedbacks that we got, that how Chinese companies have matured over the past few years, the assets, the management, the ability to have clean data, all these positive feedbacks aside, there's still the geopolitical risk linked to working with China that's going on, circling. And we've just heard, one of my colleagues at Bio just heard this company got, like, they were fully expecting this NIH found like phase 2 for starting his phase 2 study. And suddenly after the NIH asked for a list of their existing investors, the NIH just denied that fund. Like the company was fully expecting that we're going to get it. Of course, this is just one case, anecdotal case, but that company, that biotech, has a Hong Kong investor and obviously a Chinese investor alongside some other South Korean, French investors. But there is a potential risk, anecdotal at least, right now that we're hearing chatters that American fundings are just looking at this potential. And I want to remind everybody of that Trump memorandum of view, foreign America first investment policy that's also singled out China and a few other countries in terms of inbound and outbound investment, which includes biotechnology. So these are still hanging kind of, big pharma wants those assets, they need those assets, but there is still this risk that's hanging over everybody, that we don't know how it might pan out, which side it might affect, because this administration is kind of unpredictable. So the risk is still there. Like if you have a Chinese investor, if your assets coming from China, is that going to affect your chance or your presentation at the FDA? This is also a question not just for U.S. biotechs, it's going to affect Chinese companies as well.
Yeah, Leon, since you addressed the question, you asked me to comment. I think, first of all, Angus made some great points, right? You have to take into consideration. And I'll say technically, $30 million in 3 years, is it possible? It's not impossible, particularly if someone already paved the road for you. Let's say if you wanted to create another PD-1 VEGF today, and trying to get into pivotal in 3 years, yes, with $30 million from China, you probably can do it. But are you going to have a big deal? No. You're going to lose all the investment, right? So it's really about what you put on. If you use that business model, then you are basically trying to follow on someone else. Right. And if you're trying to follow on someone else, then if you have, then it requires the kind of insight that you be the first 3 or 4, right? Like the Kizo in PD-1 VEGF space, right? And if you're not among the first 3 or 4, in most of the cases, you're not going to be successful. And just look at how many PD-1 VEGF players are there. How many more deals can be done? How many additional large pharma deal can be done? What happened to 90 to 95% of PD-1 VEGF players? So if you have the mindset to spend $30 million 3 years into pivotal, I would say 90 to 95% chance you're not going to be successful.
Right. I think that's a really great point. I mean, that's also like a lot of investor and savvy executive mentioned that do not just focus on, actually, a lot of them argue the most important skill for like a biotech CEO or investors identify the right project to work on, especially in China, right? The competition is furious. Of course, everyone can do like a almost perfect execution, but it's really about which direction you're gonna run in towards, right? You don't want to run to wrong direction, and you actually the faster, further you run, the further you're away from your ultimate like a right destination. It's a very good point.
Inside ahead of everyone else, that's the key.
Right, exactly. So I guess that's all we have for today. We're gonna save a few minutes if there's any question from the audience. I'm checking right now. I think we already typed away all the questions. I don't see any question from the audience, but if you do, please raise your hand.
I do have a question for Angus, actually, from your ASCO ADC moving to first line. But those are topo-1 payload ADC. Given the concern for cross-resistant in topo-1 ADC, I wonder, does that mean it's going to reduce the eligible population in the second line and later? So yeah, just try to hear, if you heard anything in ASCO on these kind of thoughts.
I don't think particularly I've heard, thanks, Jiamin. I've heard any concern around that shrinking pool for the second line patients. I think what the industry is trying to go right now with a post ADC setting is maybe definitely using another type of payload to kind of deal with that. Not definitely if you are using topo-1 in first line, I'm not going to use topo-1 in the second line. So that's sort of what they're trying to do, trying to solve at this point. And this is obviously still very new. Like these assets are just going into first line, and some of them, like probably I've heard like people are still talking, is this the real first line standard of care? Is this really? So there people still have some doubts about whether this is obviously passive. That's very clear. This is first line in bladder cancer. So this is so something very new to people, and they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do. But as you said, yeah, if you're using topo-1, there's going to be an additional problem for follow-on therapies to also use that mechanism. And obviously, you're going to have to just look for additional assets. With that risk, it's definitely opportunities for companies that are developing those alternatives. So I wouldn't worry too much about like there's going to be less options. Of course, maybe in the short term, like there will maybe reduce options available after that. And also we can't forget like the huge benefits that first line option can provide versus some of the shrinking options in the second line. I'm sure people, like I said, as you move to the first line, this post ADC posting HER2 market becomes very large, becomes very attractive compared to like when you started in the third line. So right now there should definitely be more incentives for companies looking at those questions, like what's the post ADC strategy for future studies, because a lot of the studies right now being done are still using like very traditional control arm or very traditional approaches. So the newer wave of drugs will definitely have some answers. Looking at using like different payloads or different approaches. I know that probably doesn't answer your question directly, but I think we'll have some solutions. Like when the market is big enough, like when ADCs use the first line and you're trying to solve the second line problem, I think there will be a lot of companies who will be interested in exploring.
Thank you very much.
There.
Yeah, just like after PD-1 space become a big problem. Yeah, future maybe after any topo-1 ADC will be another battlefield for the novel therapy to think.
Yeah, I think this is very attractive.
I have another thought to probably share with you. I mean, just get a kind of feedback from everyone. If you think about the topo-1 inhibitor, right, really derived from uratican, right? This is like a classic chemo. If you think about chemo, how people use it, people barely use a chemo monotherapy anymore, right? So oftentimes a combo. I mean, some oncologists kind of jokingly call the ADC precision chemo. I probably gonna call them precision chemo monotherapy, right? That's what most ADC are. Doesn't matter you are like a monospecific, bispecific, but still you are like a precision chemo monotherapy. I think there's a clear trend people are testing, move from monotherapy precision chemo to combo precision chemo, right? That's like a dual payload, multi-payload, like company like a Calio, Sutro, or AlphaMap Oncology based in China. So I think that would be very interesting. So whether that's the case, because if you go back to, in the PD-1 space, what's the most successful combo still is the PD-1 plus chemo. I mean, that's why people want to first replace PD-1 with the PD-1 VEGF. And they want to replace the chemo with the precision chemo, which is ADC. Probably next stage is going to be replace mono precision chemo with combo precision chemo, which is probably dual or multiple payload ADC. That's just I'm thinking, pure like a kind of a speculation.
Yeah.
So I think go ahead.
Yeah, Leon, you made a great point. I really like how you describe it. And I want to add, remind that Innovent is the first one actually who dosed the patient with a dual payload ADC. That happens earlier this year. So we are.
So fantastic, right? So you also saw that it's kind of very kind of a natural. If you look at a big trend, that's how like a cancer treatment evolved, right? The IO become a pillar, and obviously IO has been evolving. Now, of course, chemo has been evolving, and they have ADC breakthrough and ADC like Innovent probably saw this as well. I guess Michael Yu also, he's a scientist, believe this as well. So, okay, I'm very very glad that we are on the same page. Any other comments from the audience? Oh, by the way, people staring at the screen, if you scan the QR code, actually bring you to our YouTube channel, which is could be very useful because we're gonna post our replay of today's webinar on our YouTube channel later. I will ask around for the panelists if whether you have other questions to each other. If you don't, I probably do a little bit of conclusion and also a little bit of pre-announcement for our future webinar. Any question to each other from the panel? Last call. All right, then a little bit advertisement for us. So we have 2 more episodes coming. The first one, we already mentioned today, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, biotech doing pretty well. We actually already get a few experts from Hong Kong capital market and CEO lined up. That's our next episode going to be. Really to give people first-hand experience from those people who have decades of experience on Hong Kong Stock Exchange, especially in the biotech capital market. That's the first episode. The second one, actually going to be a collaboration with all the lead influencer from the 4 major market in Asia, South Korea, Singapore, China, and India, to talk about their biotech industry, what's a different advantage and the flavor they have. Because again, our name is Asian biotech community, right? So we are not just about China. We really want to show people the rise of Asian biotech. So the incoming 2 episodes can be very interesting. Regardless, I think a lot of Asian biotech company about pharma actually really eye the capital market in Hong Kong to raise capital. I remember there's a recent Singaporean biotech company went IPO in Hong Kong. So it can be very interesting. I think a lot of our Western audience probably are gonna learn so much for the incoming 2 episodes. And also shout out to our co-host Jiamin and Angus. We also would like to invite the companies to sponsor our webinar. As you can see, we have a very high caliber speakers like Sam, like Betty, and we publish a weekly newsletter, have more than 4,000 subscribers, over 75% open rate. That's something you probably have never heard about. That's we have a lot of loyal executive readers, both from our BioVerse as well as our newsletter. So please sponsor us. So then we can have a more episode, higher quality material for everyone in our community. With that being said, I really like to thank our speakers, Sam, Betty, and my friend and buddies, and Jiamin and Angus. Thank you all, the audience. Stay with us almost 90 minutes. We wish you a safe trip home. A lot of you probably went to bio, and we're looking forward to meeting you again next month. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.